Hey everyone, I hope you're all staying safe out there. Before I begin, this is technically multiple videos in one. I'll put chapters down at the bottom so hopefully it won't be too confusing to follow. I don't have any visuals today, so this video is going to have more of a podcast style to it. So I wanted to start this off by taking some time to talk about what to expect on this channel in the upcoming future. I normally try to keep my personal life off of social media, but the fact is that as I get older, things are becoming a lot more demanding. I mean, I'm gonna be turning 31 in just a couple of months, and it seems like ever since last year, I have been juggling multiple responsibilities. Whether it's work obligations, taking care of family, or just the freedom of spending time with friends or pursuing personal projects. The time I used to spend on hobbies like video editing or posting fun artwork has drastically dropped. Now, don't worry, it's not going to be like last time, so you don't have to worry about me deleting all my videos and disappearing for another 5 years. But I never really took being a YouTuber that seriously. I don't have an upload schedule. I mean, how often do I actually upload? At first, when I came back with my talk and draw videos, I was just going to use this channel to promote my artwork. But what I would really like is to do it just as a fun pastime hobby, and I think that's when YouTube videos are at their best, is when you're just having fun. And I still am going to be posting sometimes, but after the year is over, there's a good possibility that I'm not going to be as active, unless it's to answer messages, so I'm still going to be staying in touch with everyone. It's just that, with all of the changes going on in my life, the amount of time that I used to spend on making content is now being redirected towards improving myself, and I think that's very important. Now, as for what's to come in the future for To Go Show Media, there are a couple of video retrospectives that I am still working on, but they're taking longer to make than expected. One of them is sort of like the Spider-Man retrospective I did a couple years ago, but the other one is going to be like a really long retrospective, almost like a documentary, so there's no telling when that's going to get completed. I'm not setting any more deadlines at this time. If I am going to keep uploading videos and artwork, I want to do it at my own pace, and I want it to be fun. I would like to do a lot more speed draws as well. Even though nobody watches those videos, I still think it's cool getting to draw and make videos at the same time. Originally, I planned on doing a lot more of those types of videos, but unfortunately, those are the hardest ones for me to make because of how technical the editing has to be. Trust me, I cannot tell you how embarrassing it is to be spending endless hours on a speed draw video, only to then realize that there's 5 minutes of footage missing. And if you're somebody who enjoys my artwork, then you're still going to be seeing that on my other social media. And being an artist, being what it is now, I would like to start pursuing a lot more personal projects. Another thing I want to cover is that there have been a couple of videos that I planned on uploading, but I decided against it at the last minute after realizing I didn't like how they turned out. Here's the thing with me, I am proud of all of the videos that are currently up on my channel. Even though there's not a lot, I am proud of what I have. But if I make a video and it does not turn out the way that I want it to, I'll try my best to fix the mistakes that I made. However, if I'm not able to, then I will not upload it. And there's definitely been some shortcomings this year. Like way back in April, I was going to do a review on the Amazon Prime Fallout series. And then just a month ago, I was also going to do a review on Suicide Squad Isekai. As you could probably guess, neither of those turned out the way that I'd hoped, so I did not upload them. However, since I did not get to talk about them before, I thought this vlog would give me a good opportunity to give my thoughts on both of them, along with some other things I've seen recently. So I guess I'll just go one at a time. I'll start off with the Fallout show first. Now, Amazon Prime's Fallout is a series that I had very mixed thoughts on back when I saw it. I do have some experience with the game series like Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and New Vegas. I'm not too familiar with the originals, sadly, but I really like Fallout 3, so I was curious about this. And with this Amazon series, I personally think the creators really struggled. Now granted, I think they did a better job than they did with Halo, but that's not saying a whole lot. At the same time though, I don't think it is as bad as some critics have made it out to be. It definitely does have its highlights, but there are definitely a lot of problems. I've heard people complain that the special effects look cheesy, but I think a lot of people seem to forget that the Fallout series is supposed to be cheesy. The video games, they take a lot of inspiration from old sci-fi movies from the 50s. I mean, the plot of the games is lifted directly from 1955's The Day the World Ended, and if you know me, you know that I love old sci-fi B-movies with silly special effects, and I personally don't think the effects were that bad. The Gulper looked fantastic, the Yaogoi mutant bear, the cockroaches, all of that stuff looked great, so I don't think the special effects are the problem. I think part of the problem, though, is that there were not enough monsters from the games. Seriously, no Mireworks, no Deathclaws, no giant scorpions, no giant ants, no mole rats? I just think that's kind of a letdown. I mean, maybe they're planning to save these creatures for Season 2, but the only time where the special effects really bothered me was at the very beginning with the mushroom clouds. It's supposed to be a genuinely scary and devastating scene, but the terrible mushroom cloud in the first episode just took me out of the experience. There's nothing wrong with being campy, but when you're trying to have a dramatic scene, there's a need for some realism in order to create tension. And that wasn't the case here. Instead, it just looks like an After Effects or like a PS3 video game graphic. And then you have the actors. I thought the lead actors all tried their hardest, but I feel like the terrible writing limited their performances. Ella Purnell I liked, I thought she did her best. Same goes with Aaron Moten, and of course Walton Goggins as the ghoul. Their performances were not bad, but the script that they're forced to work with just did not complement their acting abilities. However, the secondary cast members are another story. Every other actor in this is just phoning it in. The only one that I thought actually did a good job was Michael Emerson as the role of the Doctor. He reminds me of those mad scientists that you always see in classic B-movies, but he gets killed off very early on, which is a letdown. But the other side characters all give the same lousy performances. Once Ella Purnell leaves the vault, almost every character that she bumps into behaves exactly the same. It's weird because I remember the Fallout games being pretty diverse, with characters from all kinds of different backgrounds and cultures. Some of them were very intelligent, while others were very dumb. But as for this Amazon Prime series, just about every side character that she bumps into is a disgusting dumb redneck. From episode to episode, I got so burnt out on seeing the same slack-jawed faces and hearing the same fake country accents. I mean, this entire show is just needlessly trashy. I mean, in the very first episode, there's a scene where a guy is wiping his privates on a window curtain right after having sex. And then in the second episode, there's a guy talking about violating chickens. And then in the fourth episode, they show a woman's water break, and it's like, what the fuck am I watching? I feel like I was watching a bad Rob Zombie movie sometimes. There's a lot of really bad dialogue. I seriously had to rewind when I heard lines such as, "How are you handling the death of the father of your unborn baby?" That's the kind of dialogue this show has. Instead of delving deeper into the lore of the Fallout universe, this show just goes straight for the shock value. I've read interviews where the showrunners have said that it's a waste of time trying to please the fans, and I will admit they are half right. You are never going to please everybody. If you've seen my videos, you know that I normally don't mind adaptations being different from the source material. However, it becomes frustrating when the showrunners start breaking some pretty basic rules. They completely messed up that famous shot from the games where you come up from the vault and there's that bright sun glare before you get to see the destroyed landscape. If you know the games, you know what I'm talking about. It's one of the most iconic moments from the games. They completely messed that up here because it's not even focusing on the landscape. And it ruins the build-up as well because they show us glimpses of the wasteland before she even leaves the vault. I will say one thing though. There are some clever moments, like there's one part where they find a dead body in front of a TV and the TV is playing an old documentary about rodent overpopulation. I actually love that scene. That actually felt like something from the video games. But these moments are overshadowed by some of the lousier moments, like when the characters wander into Vault 4. You have the part where Purnell finds out that these other vault dwellers are connected to the woman that kidnapped her father. And I was like, finally, this show is starting to go somewhere. But it goes nowhere. I don't know if it was trying to be like the games, because in the games you also had a bunch of pointless side quests that go nowhere. But when you are interrupting the plot of a show that only has 8 episodes, that becomes a problem. I mean, this series feels very aimless, just hopping back and forth from one location to the next. That is ultimately the show's biggest flaw, is that it is completely aimless. It's like they couldn't figure out how to adapt the games, so they just decided to do whatever they thought would work. The best rating that I could give Fallout Prime is a 5 out of 10, and you might think that sounds a bit high, but I actually respect the show because at least it knows what it wants to be. It's supposed to be cheesy and ridiculous. Again, I like the monster effects, the leads did their best, the cinematography I thought was top notch. I love the way that it's filmed. The landscape shots are honestly some of the show's biggest highlights. I love all of the different locations and set pieces, so the show might not be that good, but at least it's not like god-awful or anything. So those are my thoughts on the Fallout Amazon Prime series. And then next are my thoughts on Suicide Squad Isekai. Now, when I first heard about this show, my initial thought was, well, it might not be that great, but maybe the animation will be fun to watch. And you know, it's actually funny that Warner Bros. Would try to mix DC Comics with an isekai of all things, because if you think about it, the American superhero genre and the Japanese isekai genre have a lot in common with each other. They're both often criticized for being cliché, mindless entertainment, and yet they still somehow manage to be very successful. Perhaps I'll go deeper into the subject another time, but I'm usually all over this type of entertainment no matter how bad it is, and even I had a hard time sitting through this show. I know this probably does have its fans. I personally haven't heard too much praise for the show, and usually I would feel bad for making fun of something like this, but I think it's become universally agreed on that Warner Bros. Has completely dropped the ball on the DC franchise. And I'm not even just talking about all of the disappointing popcorn movies, even their cartoon adaptations have been mediocre. With the exception of standalone movies like The Batman and The Joker, DC is washed up. And also, I think Marvel did a way better job at appealing to the anime crowd, what with Madhouse and everything. But it's not like DC cannot do it if they tried harder. Way back in 2008, there was a Batman anime film called Batman Gotham Knight, which I highly recommend. It's got some great fight scenes, Kevin Conroy as the voice of Batman, and it's got this beautiful animation, way better than this. Now, there are some highlights where the animation does look pretty nice. In fact, sometimes it looks amazing, but I'm going to list off the parts where I thought the animation looked good. I liked when you see the close-up of the dragon's eye in the first episode, and it zooms out and you see it fly away. And I like when it rains. The rain scenes looked really nice. I like the scene where Joker and Harley Quinn are dancing on the rooftop, and I liked when Harley has her weird Sailor Moon-style transformation. I thought all of those scenes were pretty good. But these moments are far and few in between. The rest of the show looks like a Saturday morning cartoon or like Young Justice or something. And what's sad is that this was animated by Wit Studio, the same people that worked on Vinland Saga, Attack on Titan, Spy X Family, and plenty of others. This is not an amateur studio. They've worked on some great stuff, and that's honestly one of the only reasons why I was kind of holding out hope for this. But I guess Warner Bros. Must have been cutting corners on the budget, which seems to be the reg for them now. I mean, I was not expecting a masterpiece, but damn, I did not realize that it was going to look this bad. The movements are all stiff and sluggish looking. There's times where it looks like the frame rate is dropping and the movements get choppy. There's even some parts where the outlines look like scribbles, like Dr. Katz or something. I always thought that part of the beauty of anime is how expressive and detailed it is. You have all these new shows and movies coming out that are trying to go above and beyond with animation and visual storytelling, and then you have Suicide Squad Isekai. Clayface was really disappointing. Remember in Batman the Animated Series how gruesomely detailed it was when Clayface would transform? And that was for a children's cartoon in the 90s. But this is lazy. Whenever he transforms, his whole body just turns into a bunch of messy outlines, and he's got like these ugly gradient colors on him, and it's just a really lousy Clayface. And you know what? You can get away with having cheap animation if you at least have a good art style to go with it, but the art style is just constantly changing. When the show is at its best, it looks like the Netflix Castlevania series, but when it's at its worst, it looks like a poor man's version of Avatar or the Boondocks or something. The character designs are never the same, like Deadshot looks different every time he's on screen. And then there's a couple of scenes where it looks like it's rotoscoped for some reason. Sometimes it tries to be like the intro to Cowboy Bebop. And then there's other parts where it'll have like these random video filters like screen tearing, static. There's some scenes where it'll have like these rainbow color flashes with silly pop music in the background, characters randomly start dancing. This show cannot decide what it wants to be. However, it's not just the way the show looks that's bad, but the voice acting is also a huge letdown. I couldn't believe it because there's a lot of voice actors in this who I happen to be familiar with. Scott Gibbs, who does the Joker, is someone whose voice I've heard in a ton of different shows. He has talent, but he was not a good choice for the Joker. There are lots of different interpretations of the Joker, but this has got to be one of the worst Joker voices I have ever heard. To me, it sounded like he was trying to make the Joker sound like Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise, especially the way he laughs was just not how the Joker should sound. And then you have Carly Hotch as the voice of Harley Quinn. Again, she's been in other good stuff, and I will admit, I do think she makes a better Harley Quinn than Kaylee Cuoco did. But you can tell she struggles a lot with Harley's New York accent, and none of the dialogue that she's given is funny or witty. And then most of the other actors ranged from being either just okay to being completely awful. I watched the first few episodes in English, but halfway in I switched over to Japanese, and normally I don't have a problem with dubbing, but some of these voices were just so annoying I had to switch to the Japanese version, and if you're wondering if it made the show any better, well, I guess. I mean, it actually did make it a bit more interesting. Sometimes I struggle with subtitles because of my dyslexia, but at the same time though, I just thought it was refreshing getting to hear a Japanese interpretation of these classic DC characters. The Joker in the Japanese version is voiced by Yuichiro Umehara, the same guy who voiced Goblin Slayer, so I thought that was pretty cool. It's just, good voice acting cannot save the show because it still has the same terrible animation and the writing. The writing is something else. I mean, this entire show is just constantly winking at the viewer. Every 10 seconds, the characters are always breaking the fourth wall. This is meta to the extreme. But what's strange is that it never really tries to poke fun at any of the infamous tropes that come with the isekai genre. You would think that they would try to be self-aware, but I don't even think the producers of the show even know what they're making fun of, or I don't know if it's trying to be like a parody or an homage. I don't even know what the show is trying to be. If you're going to combine two of the most run-of-the-mill genres together, both East and West, why don't you go all out and make fun of yourself? You know, just to make a point, I have a really embarrassing confession to make. I have watched a fair number of other run-of-the-mill isekai anime series from start to finish, and here's what I will say, even when they are at their worst, they at least have a campy fun quality which makes them watchable. But I struggled so hard just to get through the first episode of this, it's not even funny. Literally, the show is not funny. The writing is just standard Warner Bros. Writing. And then you have all these cringeworthy one-liners, like when Deadshot says to Harley Quinn, you know, not all bad guys are as ugly as you think. However, the worst offense of all, the one thing that completely ruined this whole show for me, was just how slow it is. It does not even start to have a plot until the 5th episode. The first chunk of the show is just the Suicide Squad running around in a fantasy world doing slapstick and acting like they're in a Scooby-Doo cartoon. And then it always cuts back and forth to these royals spouting a bunch of oddly vague exposition which takes forever to finally go anywhere. The character motivations are also very jumbled because sometimes it seems like they want to stay in the fantasy world, but then other times it seems like they want to get back to their homeworld. And the show does a very poor job at making the Suicide Squad into compelling characters. I mean, even though they are supposed to be bad guys, the comics were still able to make you care about them. This show, however, the Suicide Squad feel very one-dimensional, and it makes it very difficult to care what happens to any of them. In the 6th episode, there's a scene where Harley is crying because she thinks the rest of the squad are all dead, and it confused me because up till that point, it felt like there was no real chemistry between any of them. In fact, the first episode implies that most of them have never even met till now, so there's not even an established connection between these versions of the characters. There are brief references to Deadshot's connection to his daughter, but for the most part, he just seems to forget about her. They just felt like mere caricatures of themselves. All they do is tell bad jokes. They have no depth or complexity, and even when it tries, it completely fails. I'm sure though that this probably appeals to much younger people. Maybe if I was like 15 years younger, this probably would have appealed to me much more. And obviously, whenever an American studio collaborates with a Japanese studio, it can be pretty cool. But the problem is that that's the only thing that this show seems to be selling itself on. If this had been made in-house by Warner Bros.' very own animation division, then it would be just another generic action cartoon for adults that tries way too hard at being hip and edgy. The only reason that I was even interested in watching this is because, again, the animation studio and the voice actors, I did actually think this could be decent, but not just that. You still have people like me who want to believe that DC can get their shit together. I used to love DC, whether it's the comics, the movies, the cartoons. I used to think highly of this stuff, and I cannot believe how badly they've dropped the ball on everything. And there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from Japanese anime. Even as an artist myself, I'm guilty of the same thing. But you need to know how to properly combine both mediums. Like, take for example, there was that new Spider-Man Ultraman manga that just got released a while ago, Along Came a Spider-Man. Even though it's a manga, not an anime, but still though, I think that does a way better job at mixing both Japanese and American storytelling. My final rating for this show is a 3 out of 10. I'm sure there is an audience for this, and that's cool, but I just don't get it. Unfortunately, this also crushes my hopes for that upcoming Lord of the Rings anime that Warner Bros. Is working on. And while we're on the subject of Warner Bros. And DC, just yesterday I watched the Joker sequel starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, and I cannot bring myself to review it. How can you review a movie that is supposed to be bad? I think everyone else already ripped this movie a new one, and there's really no point because you're not supposed to like the movie. The fact that Todd Phillips just hightailed out of Warner Bros. After making the movie is quite telling. He knew what he was doing. This feels like a troll. This movie feels like a mockery of Hollywood cash grabs because it pretty much is. It tries to imitate everything that made the first movie good, but in a less than stellar fashion. And it doesn't even feel unintentional. It feels like they were actually trying to make it bad. This sequel is a deliberate mockery. They even make references to Roger Corman. There's a scene where Joker runs past a movie theater and they're showing a bucket of blood, which I think is one of Roger Corman's first movies. As soon as they made that reference, I knew what they were doing. You're not supposed to take this movie seriously. It's a joke. And frankly, I think it's just awesome that we now have a DC movie that actually pays tribute to the late Roger Corman. I never thought that would happen. But I actually had a good laugh while I was watching this. I don't know how else to say it. It's nowhere as good as the first movie. I think that goes without saying. I mean, it's still bad, but it's so bad that it's actually funny. I just cannot bring myself to hate this movie. I think Joaquin Phoenix still does a good job. Honestly, his acting was one of the only genuinely good things about it. I don't think he was as good as he was in the first movie, but it was still nice getting to see him play the Joker for a second time. And as for Lady Gaga, which that casting still baffles me, but this is gonna sound really shocking, but I actually liked how she portrayed Harley Quinn. It's a very different take on the character. Like, she makes Harley Quinn into an extremely cold and manipulative character. There are times where she makes it hard to tell when she's lying and when she's telling the truth, and those are some of my favorite interactions between her and Arthur. If this had been a much better movie, I would say that she made a fantastic Harley Quinn. However, just like everybody else that criticized this movie, I did hate the musical sections. I thought those parts completely slowed down the movie. And it's not that I have anything against musicals. I like Rocky Horror, I like Little Shop of Horrors. One of my favorite British films is Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire, and that's a musical. So I'm not one of these people who hates the new Joker movie just because it's a musical. But the songs they decided to use are just not that memorable. I cannot remember a single one of them except like something about mountains or something. But of course they also use a lot of songs from the first movie repeatedly. I lost count of how many different renditions I had to hear of That's Life, but at the same time, that's the whole point. This entire sequel is blatantly letting you know how pointless and repetitive it is by copying everything that made the first movie good. I think this might be the right way to go about being meta because it just makes fun of itself. And I love it because it's the first time in a long time that I can recall seeing a major Hollywood movie that openly acknowledges how bad it is. I cannot give this a rating because how are you even supposed to rate this movie? I feel like I just got pranked. That's what I love about it. It feels like this is a movie that the Joker himself would make. I respect it whenever a filmmaker is actually willing to experiment with different crazy ideas. So that covers everything. My voice is killing me right now. This video turned out way longer than I thought it would, so if you watched all the way through, I'm very grateful. Anyway, keep an eye out for new content. I should have a new video out real soon. So again, thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time.